of Stevens Point Personnel Committee meeting, recorded March 9, 2020.
Personnel Committee is called to order at 7:24, and everybody is here. Yay us. The only item on the agenda is a non-decision item having to do with whether we retain our system of electing 3 of the citywide electeds: Comptroller, Treasurer, City Attorney, and City Clerk. It was proposed for the agenda by President Johnson, whom we would love to hear from to get us started.
I remain Melissa Johnson, District 5. So my memo was fairly straightforward. What got me, well, I think about this frequently, particularly when we have discussions of pay for officials like a comptroller, treasurer, a clerk, and then on the county side, we've got the sheriff and a number of other elected positions, register of deeds. And when the qualifications, even though we've been fortunate on both sides to have well-qualified individuals in those roles, or at least currently have qualified individuals in those roles, you know, collecting a couple of signatures, living in the jurisdiction, being 18 years of age and older, and no felony conviction is somewhat of a low bar. And I work with a lot of different communities in the state of Wisconsin in my professional role in leadership in solid waste and recycling. And so I see other communities, and of course I'm most familiar with Wausau because it's in Marathon County. They have appointed finance director, they have an appointed attorney, Ann Jacobs is a great attorney. And so it started me really thinking about it when we hired, the council opted to hire a clerk. Not go back to the voters, but we said, we want a list of qualified applicants. So this then led me to that discussion. Now, I've had a number of discussions, actually a long one yesterday after taking my dog for a walk, and well, I had lots of stories from this one guy that lives down the street, but he said, you know, you kind of wonder who's going to be in there next. And I said, yeah, that's what kind of has me thinking. We're a growing community. Do we want well-qualified individuals not only now but well into the future for things as critical as managing multi-millions of dollars worth of investments, which again, we are very lucky. This is not about people. Please understand that. Corey's done a fabulous job. This isn't about him. This is about the position and into the future. What are we looking at? So that's what prompted this, and I thought it was an appropriate discussion for us to have. I also think that obviously there's not going to be an action this evening, but one action to consider would be to form a small working group to sort of look at this and see how we can build this for the future, find out pluses and the minuses, not from our opinions, but what we learn from other communities and why they've done this. So that's what prompted it, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, President Johnson. Any questions from the committee? We won't promise not to, you know.
I'm just over there.
Come back.
Just over there.
Please remain,
Right.
Melissa Johnson.
Yes, I shall. I promise not to change.
You're not going to change?
I mean, key fact, we are in a small minority for electing these positions. I think even smaller for some than the others, and President Johnson's memo also explains that, as you just said, some other communities have made the change in this direction, but it would be a significant change, obviously, which is why this is just to get the discussion started. There's also, a history. For those who have not looked at the packet, and now I'm looking at our viewers, there is
History.
thank you, thank you, Director Yakush, for pulling it together.
Yeah,
And,
the two of us were there.
and both, all three of you appear in this
yeah.
history. The issue was explored in depth and at length in 2012, and the document, the records from those meetings and discussions are all in the packet and available. I think other comments, we wouldn't need to weigh in on the mechanism that was raised just now. Yeah, please.
No, so I was an alderperson the last time we discussed this. We did form a committee at that time to explore the possibility. That committee at the time concluded that it wasn't necessary. I am completely okay with revisiting this because that was 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Things change. I'm also of the understanding through Mayor Fiegelson, or former Mayor Fiegelson, that at one point this came to a referendum, but we weren't able to find any information regarding that referendum. And Mayor Fiegelson's been out of office now for a considerable amount of time. We just may not have had the correct records, or maybe recollection isn't what it used to be. There are pros and cons to having hired or appointed staff or having electeds. The thing to note is that if your biggest concerns at this time are qualifications, we're allowed to put qualifications on those elected positions. And currently, the argument can be made that an alder who has ultimate control over the budget, over the Public Works Department, and all of the decisions that we make have the same requirements. There isn't an education requirement for an alderperson, yet they have arguably more authority than the comptroller treasurer in most cases. If your concern is those qualifications, we have the authority to put qualification requirements on that elected office. Be careful there, though, as well, because just because you have you're a CPA or a bar member licensed to practice in Wisconsin doesn't necessarily make you a good person, a nice person, or a capable person in any of those positions. The discussion I think that we should have before the next election cycle is just this. And if it's the requirements that you want, we need to vet those carefully to make sure that we're getting what you want to be getting and that we don't have any unintended consequences to those actions. So I would suggest that if you have thoughts on this, you can send them through the clerk's office. That seems the most reasonable. And we can try and come up with another recommendation. If we want to form a committee again to explore that, that would be appropriate as well. And then the committee would be able to request information from other communities, pros and cons, just like we did back in 2012.
I have one question.
Alder Nabel.
Sorry, there's a mention in here in the history that that the special committee didn't get further into the appointment process, that the closest they got was Alderman O'Meara's draft, and I'm wondering, do we have that?
It's probably there somewhere, but I would bet dollars to donuts that Alder O'Meara, or former Alder O'Meara, still has that.
Yep.
We'll try and find that.
I just thought that might be something that.
Clerk, if you want to call Alder or former Alder O'Meara, or you can remind me tomorrow and I can contact him. All the more reason to contact him. That's right, I forgot he was going. But we should probably have something like that in the records somewhere. We'll just try and dig that out.
Thanks for that question. Alder Dugan, Vice Chair Dugan.
Yeah, I had a couple of comments, and I was surprised to see my name and the mayor's name and all kinds of names in there. Those were the days when I was still writing a column for the paper, and I think I I was there for that. But I just wanted to, for my own use, I tried to look at the pluses and the minuses on both sides, you know, elected or appointed. And so I just have a couple here that I want to share. For maintaining the elected people, the plus would be that there's public involvement. That's important to me, is the public involved here. Because, well, they would be involved because they, you know, would have selected these people by electing them. Another plus is that there is autonomy. A person who's elected does not have to follow a management authority. The mayor doesn't tell them what to do. He isn't the CEO there. A couple of minuses, however, would be that what we've all talked about, and it's really important, they might not have enough experience or education or certification, and that concerns me a lot. But right now we have good ones that do, but that we can't count on that. And then the other thing I'm concerned about is that when people are elected and put into place, the council has no input at all. It just comes to us. I would like to see council have more input. I would like to have more experience, education, certification. But as an appointed person, there's no public input there. That's a minus for me. You're under the management, under the authority of the mayor in most cases, the CEO, and that's a minus in my view. A plus, appointed person likely has experience, education, certification. Another minus, no council input. It's, for the most part, the mayor selects, at least currently. So improvements for those pluses and minuses, I would be very much in favor of trying to find someone with experience, education, certification, you know, knowledge, and I'm glad to hear that we could do that with an elected. I would really like the public to be more involved. The last time around, my heavens, we only got a very tiny bit of public input. We, you know, each alder maybe went out and got 8 people's opinions. We didn't have many people involved. Involving the council with the mayor in selecting an appointed person, I think would be very handy, helpful, and also involving council in the management and not just having one CEO in charge of our people. So those are my comments.
Thank you. I see one of the incumbents.
Mayor, I certainly don't mean to show you up in public here. However, I'm not so certain you're correct that we have the legal authority to place qualification restrictions on candidates for these positions. The reason that you have to be a bar member to serve in my position is that it would literally be illegal for you to do the work otherwise. However, the qualifications for the elected positions are specified in state statute. It says, where am I looking here? This would be 6209 sub 2. It says, no person shall be elected by the people to a city office who is not at the time of election a citizen of the United States and of this state and an elector of the city, and in the case of an aldermanic district office or the aldermanic district and actually residing therein. Now, does that say that you cannot, does that explicitly say you can't make those more strict or add to them? No, it doesn't. However, I think it's very, very likely that that would be considered a rule of general applicability across the state and therefore not subject to change under the home rule provisions. You know, think about the case from Milwaukee with the residency requirements, kind of similar to that, a little slightly different context. But also, if you think about, were it true that a council could place qualifications on that, what would be the limit of that? Because if there was an attempt to play games with it, I mean, you could say, oh, well, you have to be a graduate of Quinnipiac University, and you have to be you know, a member of the Rotary and all this stuff. And I don't know if, you know, I don't know if Corey went to
Whatever.
Marquette?
No, but I am a Rotary member. One out of two ain't bad.
That's,
See,
there
I
you
knew
go.
that one. But you could essentially play games and protect people or exclude people on the basis of that. And you could say, well, we're going to make it more general, but I think that ultimately it's questionable at best whether we could do that.
And thank you for that. I may have outspoken or overspoken myself. My recollection in 2012 was that was one of the questions that we had posed to, I think then the league attorney,
Dan,
Dan?
Dan Olson.
I don't remember the name, it was 2012, but we got an opinion
Yep,
that told us we were able to put some restrictions on there, and that's why I exercised the caution. We can't ensure someone was a Rotary member or a Knights member, Moose, I want to include all the organizations. But there were certain things that, at the time, back in 2012, that we were able to do. And if we go back to the video, I'm sure we enumerated those, but things may have changed.
It's in the packet.
It is, okay.
With regards to just the general policy questions themselves, obviously the discussion is focused on how can we ensure that we have somebody in the position who does a good job. And ultimately, I think it's clear that whether it's appointed or elected, there is the possibility of ending up with somebody who doesn't do a good job. So I think what you need to look at is, in those different scenarios, what is the mechanism for getting that person out and getting somebody else? In the case of an elected, almost always it's going to be wait 4 years and elect somebody else, almost always. These positions tend to operate in a way that doesn't lend itself to public outrage, though, unless there's something really extraordinary that happens. Incumbency can be a pretty strong factor. Whereas if you have an appointed person, the saving grace really there is the probationary period. And you'd hope that if somebody is a really, really poor fit for the position, that would become evident during the probationary period and that you could move on from that person. However, once they're past that, there are some protections there that can be even stronger than incumbency in an election, because you don't get a swing at it every 4 years at the ballot box. You end up having a situation where the person would be subject to the city administrative policies for termination. And if that's a performance issue, it becomes very difficult in a lot of cases. So I think those, rather than saying we're going to come up with a system where we guarantee we always get a good person, there isn't one. So you need to think of it more as what remedies would be available if you get the wrong person.
Thank you.
Alder Dugan.
Just a comment. I hope Attorney Beveridge will forgive me, but he does a wonderful job now. But he admitted to me, and I knew that his specialty was environmental law. Now, should we look for somebody who has public administration, a contract, specialty? There are attorneys who have specialties, and we know that. We were fortunate in Alder Laddick, who was a banker. Am I right? Yes.
And demoted to Alder, apparently.
That couldn't be better. But I think that if we did ask, we could be a little bit more specific, I think, if we did ask for certain candidates.
Yeah, please, Alder Kneebone and then President Johnson.
Getting pretty good with this.
You are.
Mary Kneebone, District 7 Alder. When I was a city staffer with the City of Dallas, we worked under a city manager and a strong council, and the mayor was a figurehead. So I'm familiar with both systems, and they both have pluses and minuses. My concern, and some of my constituents said, oh, that's a stupid idea, we should elect all of them. And then I mentioned, well, what about your tax dollars and a city treasurer? Oh, well, maybe the treasurer should be appointed because, and I tend to agree. I think Corey's done a phenomenal job, and I would hope that he would be an applicant if this ever came to that. But when you're dealing with the intricacies of municipal finance and bonding and all of the things, capital projects and capital borrowing, I think you need a level of expertise that you might not get with somebody who thinks, oh, I could do that job. I know how to balance a checkbook. And I think definitely we should continue the discussion. But of all of the positions, I think the treasurer bears a lot of looking at. And I know statutory requirements with agendas makes the city clerk's job very specific as well.
Yeah, it
So I think we need to look at
It does.
things that could have ramifications beyond if somebody's not posting things correctly. So definitely worth some more study.
Yes.
Okay. Just a couple of things. I went through the Personnel Committee packet and sort of numbered the pages. So the 12th page in, and the agenda is page 1, is a memo that I sent to the council members and department heads dated August 9th, and it indicates that the person that I was getting my information from was Dan Olson, Assistant League Counsel for the League of Wisconsin Municipalities. So what I did is, on the next page, page 13, are all the questions that I posed to Dan and his answers. So again, that's from 2012, so things may have changed between now and then. The next page, page 14, has former Alderperson O'Meara's
I just saw it.
suggestions on there for the 3 different options that he saw. So that is also included in here. So I just wanted to point that out. So some of the information you're searching for already is
already
in the
here.
packet.
That's right, thank you. That is very helpful.
Yeah, Alder Jennings and then, or President Johnson. We've got Gaston, Alphonse.
Tori Jennings, Alder for District 1. The League of Municipalities Handbook for Wisconsin. So I was reviewing this, and I'm strongly in support of this change. And sticking with statute, just because we have been doing this for a long time doesn't mean that we should continue doing it. And what the statute says is Wisconsin law requires that governing bodies, body members, mayor and alderpersons, village president and trustees, and municipal judges be elected by the voters. That's it. Those are the only positions that need to be elected. And since I've been alder, I've had the privilege of working with very competent staff and very skillful staff, and it frankly terrifies me to think of a next election when somebody's popularity could put them into this role in a very complex city that is growing. And when this book also lists like things that these individuals have to do, like the comptroller treasurer, and things that one would have to be trained and highly knowledgeable and experienced to be able to do these things, witness and take testimony, countersign all contracts. I mean, it goes on and on and on, and this is just one of these many positions. So I want to thank President Johnson for bringing this forward so that we can have this serious discussion and start thinking about a future in this vibrant, wonderful city and make sure that things continue moving forward in that way. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, Alder Slawinski. It's a conspiracy.
She's a patient woman.
You were also referenced in this.
Alder Slawinski, 6th District. Yeah, I was involved in those discussions back in 2012. And I don't think my views haven't changed of how I felt back then. I mean, I know there's pros and cons to the entire thing. And I guess I would still rather see it kept the way it is, you know, utilize the checks and balances that it provides. And we have competent comptroller, we have competent attorney, we have a competent city clerk, and we have over and over again. So in my mind, it's not broke. Why change it? You know, and I hear this, you know, oh, we might get that person, but we have been, I mean, is it lucky? I don't know. But again,
Past performance is not a guarantee.
I would much rather keep it the way it is, allow the voters, you know, to make that decision, and keep that checks and balances where I know in the past there's been issues where, you know, internal there's been some internal pushing and shoving, and I just, that never goes well. So I guess that's my 2 thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you.
Could I ask a question about what he just mentioned real
Alderman
fast?
Evil.
Well, so when Alderman Slawinski, and I'm reading yours in here, it was said that whether requirements could be added to the comptroller treasurer position, still have it maintained elected status. And it was said that yes, that if you'd rather have them run for reelection, and I understand that, but what if we're not able to put those criteria in? So I like the election thing, but if we're not able to put that criteria in, we need to know that for sure, because that's where we're going to really, I'd rather have a competent person than, but if that could be added into it, vote is great.
I do personally, just to take a moment, personally, I do wonder whether, with all the different responsibilities, with what we know about what it takes to, do a job well, the answer of adding qualifications isn't obvious to me.
Right.
That will do the trick. I guess similar to what Jeremy was just saying, I mean, things have gone well. What we don't know is have we been beating the odds, right? Have the odds been with us the whole time, or how lucky have we gotten? But we've been waiting for President Johnson's second set of comments, please.
So I think there's a comfort level with what is. And we have that comfort level because we've had the luxury of having good results with the elected. I'll give you an example from my life as a department head. And by the way, I serve at the pleasure of the county board and can be dismissed. So that's how you get rid of a department head. So that's why I always try to do my job well, and also not be a jerk and make sure that my staff succeeds, because that's also part of my job. In Marathon County, we have a finance director, and very much like Portage County finance director and a treasurer. There is friction between finance director and the treasurer, and in fact, that friction of trying to figure out who's in charge. The treasurer is very clear. She's a constitutional officer and she has the authority. The finance director has the MBA. So I, as department head, am being buffeted, and I'm telling you, this is not good, because it led to a notice of noncompliance for my department because we could not settle the friction and the conflict between those two offices, the appointed and the constitutional officer. And all of my landfills have to have what's called owner financial responsibility. And basically, we've got about $16 million in cash available for long-term care and closure of the landfills, which is statute, both federal and state. So as staff, who's in charge? And an elected official answers to no one, except the voters. The challenge is when you're trying to do your job as staff so you don't get dismissed by the county board because you are a department head and serve at their pleasure, it's very challenging being in that situation. So it is something to consider, that how do we create continuity for our staff so that we have clear line of order. And again, this isn't for now. This is for long after we're gone. How do we best lay out a plan for the future of this growing and vibrant city, and hopefully it will continue to do that well past our time here? What is the best plan? And so I'm hoping we can have that discussion. And again, this has been a great discussion. I appreciate it. And I'm hoping we can pull some more things together to make some decisions. Don't hang on to what was. Think about what should be. We have an opportunity.
Thank you. Anyone else? Please, Alder Zarzua.
I think this is a great conversation. It's, just in being able to review, like President Johnson said, as far as like not just having to do things the way we always have. I'm so glad this packet had all this history in it, because that made it very convenient to see what the discussion looked like before. I'm pretty torn as far as what my own opinion is on this, because, you know, on one hand, I understand us wanting to make sure we have competent staff like we do now, but I also feel like it's taking that, we're saying we don't trust the voters to make a decision. And I mean, it's kind of a delicate balance there of saying, like, we want a small group of people to be able to decide who should be in that role versus letting the entire city decide. So I get it, but I also think there's having to run again for your position creates an accountability, because the voters are going to judge you based on what your actions have been in that role. And I like the part where they're not, that's who they answer to, is to the voters. But I also understand we want to make sure we have staff that are qualified to do the job, and not just a popular name or, you know, for whatever reason that a person might be chosen. I did think too about just a concern a constituent had, that they said there's not any competition for these jobs. So, you know, when you go to the, you know, on the ballot every time, it's not the city election, but I think of all those years of voting for riflemen, like, who is that? And, you know, riflemen.
You never meet him.
Right, I have met him now, but.
No, I mean.
And that's a partisan office, by the way. Coroner was partisan.
Yes,
Right.
like just a strange thing, you know, but,
Yep.
you know, did someone else want to jump in and take over that job? And would it have been someone that didn't have a medical background and could do a good job in that? I mean, I understand this is why we want someone that has some good qualifications, but do we take it away from the city you know, the electors to decide that?
Alder Dalton.
Yeah, I was just I echo some of those points, and I think this does come down to kind of fundamental principles of democracy and whether or not you trust the electorate and the faith that you have in electorate. And I just believe that I do have faith in the electorate to be able to recognize, and I think it's coming from what I feel an incredibly patronizing to place your judgment on whether or not an individual's vote is right or wrong because of the choice that we made, and those are not the qualifications of what makes you an eligible voter in this country. And so I am not supportive of this idea. It sounds like what President Johnson alluded to in her second points too, that some of this discussion is also coming up because of the accountability that the electeds have while interacting with the staff. And I think if that is the question, I think that falls onto some of the responsibility of leadership of us as a council, as the mayor who runs more of the day-to-day with the staff, and of the staff and electeds themselves. And so whether or not that we can put a qualification on that, I think, I mean, I understand some of the questions of competency, but I think if you feel like you are able to make that judgment, then I think you are able to assume that most of the eligible voters are able to judge that for themselves as well, and placing that upon the rest of the people is a little bit overdone.
Thanks. Vice Chair Dugan.
Yeah, one more comment, if you would allow it. One of my suggestions for improvements was to involve the public more in an educated selection, and certainly you could do that in an election setting. But it would mean an educated. People have to know who these people are if they're going to vote well. I mean, I've seen that again and again and again, voting for people they don't know because they didn't come to a meeting or they didn't look up. There are a lot of things you can do, and the League of Women Voters does a lot when people are elected. They hold big meetings and debates, and that's the kind of thing we need to do. I don't support an electorate that is not educated. We can't do good work if the city can't be well represented or well managed if we have an electorate who doesn't know what's going on.
Thanks, everybody. You know, I'll be the nth person to say this is an on the one hand, on the other hand, difficult issue. I will say that so maybe the checks in the system are working, but I can imagine us reaching a point where an election maybe has put us in a situation that is not working well. And City Attorney Beveridge reminds us that the term of office is 4 years, right? So I guess that's a way of saying, again, just this is worth continuing to discuss, and this has been a great start. So thanks to everyone, and we are adjourned at 7:59.
Videos of these meetings are available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.